Hi, I'm Amy. Thank you for tuning in. I'm joined today by one of my favourite horror authors who you can already see on screen, Cat Ellis. I think she's that way on the screen. We'll go that way just to cover
Hello.
our bases. Morning, Cat, and possibly evening by the time we get this video on YouTube. Cat is the author of lots of fantastic YA horrors, including Harrow Lake, which you can see behind me, one of my favourite books. She's also written books, and behind Cat, she's also written books like Blackfin Sky and Purge. So I am really excited to be here with Cat, my first author interview. So if you enjoyed this interview, please let me know. I'm sure you will because Kat is amazing. And I've got a few more interviews lined up over the coming weeks. So for the first question, thank you so much, Kat, for joining us.
Thank
Be
you
my
very much for
first
having me.
be
I'm
my first
honoured.
author interview. So anything could happen. There'll be lots of dark talk between the two of us, I'm sure.
No
Um,
doubt.
so first, can you tell us a little bit about your upcoming book, which is Wicked Little Deeds, coming out in August in the UK?
I can, yes. Wicked Little Deeds, as it's known in the UK, or Burden Falls in the US. It's coming out this August, and it tells the story of a young girl called Ava Thorne who lives in the town of Burden Falls, which the US edition is named after. She's grown up living in a manor house, which is next to this waterfall that, local legend has it is cursed, and it's haunted by this ghostly figure called Dead-Eyed Sadie.
That
Um,
name.
Yes, and this is like the ghost that's been haunting Ava's nightmares ever since her parents died in this horrific accident a year ago. She's been having these nightmares over and over again where Dead-Eyed Sadie appears to her. And then when dead bodies start turning up in Burden Falls, and Ava is the primary suspect in the police investigation, she starts wondering whether actually the rumours about Dead-Eyed Sadie might actually be more fact than fiction, and whether it is the ghost or not, somebody, whoever is killing these people, has something against the Thorns. So that's what Wicked Little Deeds is about.
Oh, I love that pitch so much. I'm sorry I interrupted, but every time I hear Dead-Eyed Sadie, I just think that is the most brilliant antagonist ghost girl name. So well done with that.
Thank you.
Just to admit to everybody watching, I'm very lucky to have read a very, very early copy of Wicked Little Deeds, and it is excellent. It is just as creepy and unsettling as it sounds. And what I wanted to ask you about, Kat, one of the first questions was, I love in your books the fact that you tread the line of, as a reader and as your characters feel, of not knowing whether the supernatural is real or not. And I was wondering, is that something that you do consciously, and that you, as you start out writing a book, do you know that that's what you're going to do, or does that kind of feel form as you go?
It is something that I do try and do, at least to begin with, because I think in a good horror, a lot of what is scary is what you hold back from the reader, what they're not quite sure is real or not. Is that sound something supernatural happening in the room next door, or is it, just the dripping tap, that sort of thing. So yeah, that is something that I try and do, at least initially, and then when I figured out how the book ends, and I usually have some idea where it's going, but when I've figured out for sure, as I've gotten to know the characters and all the action that's happening, I then sort of know which way I want to lean, whether I want it to be more supernatural or more, in the real world. But sometimes I think it's quite nice to leave that seed of doubt so that the reader isn't quite sure, was everything real or was everything supernatural? Or, I like to leave people guessing, or at least figuring it out from the clues that I've planted.
You definitely did that in both books. I feel like Harrow Lake and Wicked Little Deeds are those books that feel, I like a satisfying story that closes off. But books like that, sometimes I find you don't think about them ever again. And I still sometimes think about Mr. Jitters. And I'm definitely still, I finished Wicked Little Deeds a couple of days ago, and I'm still stewing over a few of the plot points. And I think that that is really clever and sign of really good horror that gets under your skin and is quite insidious.
Oh,
So
thank you very much.
congratulations for being insidious. But yeah, I'm interested then. So do you think, as a viewer and as a reader, what do you find scariest? Do you think that supernatural subject matters, or the things that could happen in real life are scarier?
Well, if I'm watching it, I think something supernatural is always probably scarier, because it's something that you can't really explain or put your finger on necessarily. And it's like, how do you fight against something that you don't know how to tackle in the real world? But obviously in real life, somebody breaking into my house is probably going to be like the scariest thing that will happen to me. If in real life I was to wake up and there was a ghost in the room, I think that would probably be slightly less scary on the scale of things than waking up to a stranger. So
it's really interesting. I've talked to a few people who write similarly supernatural books that we do. And it's interesting how they seem to be quite split. Some find the real horror, like the serial killer type things, scarier, and some find the supernatural. But I think I'm with you. I think a supernatural threat that the viewer is sharing I tend to watch them on horror movies, to be honest, and you're sharing the characters feeling that something is going wrong. And when you watch things like Haunting of Hill House, and they start off knowing that they're perfectly fine, and you just know this horrible thing's going to happen to them. I think that is probably the scariest thing. And I'm now having flashbacks of Haunting of Hill House, so I'm going to move on to the next question. So what are your favourite horrors? That was another thing that I wanted to know about, because obviously you write these brilliant books that are becoming my favourites, but what has inspired you, or what do you like to read and watch?
I read all kinds of things, really. I read all different genres. I mean, I do obviously love to read horror and thriller in particular. But I've tried to recently, in particular, sort of diversify the formats of books that I'm reading. So I'm listening to a lot of audiobooks. I'm reading a lot of graphic novels and reading YA and middle grade and adult as well. So I'm trying to sort of, I don't know, just like really fill the well of inspiration and try and pull in all sorts of things. But I do have because you did give me some advance notice that I might be talking about some favourites. I do have some books that I've got here that have been recent favourites. So I'll share some YA ones, because obviously we both love YA. So some recent ones that I think you've probably read all these as well. So Good Girls Die First.
Yes,
Kathryn
definitely.
Foxfield.
Yes, a big favourite.
Amazing. About this group of teens who get trapped on like an abandoned amusement pier and start getting picked off one by one. Absolutely loved that one. There was Last One to Die, which is by Cynthia Murphy.
You have very good taste, Kat. So remind us, what's that one about?
So good. So that one's about a girl who goes to London for like a summer drama course. But when she gets there, she finds out that girls who look an awful lot like her are being murdered in really quite brutal ways that are reminiscent of the legend of Spring-Heeled Jack. So that's a fantastic supernatural horror thriller. And another one is The Creeper Man by Dawn Kurtagich. I mean, Dawn Kurtagich's books I always love, but this one, which came out a couple of years ago, is my absolute favourite, The Creeper Man, which is about two sisters who go and stay in this like dilapidated old house in the middle of the woods with their aunt that they don't really know, and she sort of secretes herself away in the attic. And like every day, it seems like the woods that surround the house are creeping closer and closer, and it's just the most like weirdest. You could feel yourself spiraling along with the characters in this one. It's absolutely chilling.
Skin is actually prickling at the memory of reading that book, so I think that's a sign of a good horror that a few years later I'm still getting chills from it. Yeah, I think Dawn does remote settings that the characters can't easily escape really well, and as you say with and I think is it called And the Trees Crept Closer, I think the US edition as well.
And the Trees Crept In.
Crept in. And I think that feeling of suffocation as the forest is getting nearer, like you said about the supernatural, there's not many things I can think of that are scarier than that, of something inescapable getting nearer and nearer to you. What happens when it actually gets there?
And obviously I do have to give a big shout out to another recent favourite, Mina
Thank you.
Undead. I mean, all of your viewers are going to know what this is about, but it's just fantastic. It reminded me of so many brilliant like cultural things from the 1990s when I was a teenager. Just absolutely loved it. So I had to give that one a shout out.
Seeing people like you hold my book, I can't actually get over still. Like, isn't that the wonderful thing about the internet age, that we can have this conversation and like one of my favourite authors can actually enjoy my book. So just try not to break my face smiling or cry on screen, which would equally be embarrassing. So maybe I'll move on to the next question. So thank you, Kat. Oh, in fact, I remember something I wanted to ask you. You've been talking a bit about manga. A manga that I've picked up recently is one by Junji Ito. I think it's called Shiver, the one I went for. I've been seeing it all over BookTube, and there's one that you have that I can't remember the name of exactly, and I'm going to mangle it if I try. Yes, that's the
Uzumaki.
one. Yeah, and I keep meaning to pick that up. So what is it, do you think, about the horror manga that is engaging and different?
It's just such an interesting like the art style itself is just, you know, easily accessible and draws you in straight away. Story in particular, this one, Uzumaki, which is about a town that becomes like possessed by spirals. And it is such a weird concept. I think possessed by spirals, is that like a horror thing? But yeah, it is so weird. And it's like a series of different short stories that are all sort of intertwined together about these different characters who become, you know, possessed by the spiral in a different way. And it just culminates in such a horrific ending that it's just brilliantly brought to life on the page with all these like fantastic pieces of artwork. I mean, you could just take any page and stick it up on your wall as a piece of art because it's so nice to look at as well.
It's really interesting, isn't it, with manga? I've always liked reading it and only just recently got into the horror ones, but it's somehow a hybrid, isn't it, of horror movies, because you see some of the horror in front of you, and then you've got the words that you can still push your imagination to the darker places. That I think sometimes horror movies, you can do that because you can fill in the blanks of what is in that dark space. You can figure out why is that music playing, and it starts to set you on edge. But I think sometimes books and manga can be scary for that reason, because you can just push it as dark as your imagination can go. And when you're horror authors like us, maybe that is quite dark.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right there. It's like the scenes that they show you are just the snapshots, so you have to fill in the rest yourself. And yeah, you're absolutely right, it gets dark.
Yeah. So on the subject of horror, I always like on your Instagram that you have photographs of interesting things, and just behind you, I noticed before you came on camera, there's sort of casually placed severed hand, you know, like everybody.
That's where Howard lives.
Yeah. And the other piece of Howard just secreted around the house, so you open the fridge and there's like an eyeball looking back at you.
It's my version of an Easter egg hunt.
Yeah, of course. Reassemble Howard. So I was interested, and I think people watching this will be as well. Is there anything creepy that you would like to show that you've collected at some time or another?
Well, I do have a couple of things. I mean, these are creepy to me because they are sort of related to my books. I have this little amber skull, this is one that my mother bought me because it's the amber skull, and it's like identical to this one, features in Blackfin Sky, my first book, and it belongs to the villain of that book. So yeah, she bought this after reading the book, so I had no idea such a thing as this actually existed in real life, but she bought it for me and I love it.
Maybe you brought it into being. There's some sort of horror movie story in that. What else can you create?
She found it. It was in some like weird back alley little like curiosity shop that she found it. So I probably did summon that into being with some kind of devil's bargain. And the other thing that I have to show is my little jitterbug, which I've had from childhood.
Can I just show mine as well?
Legs.
When I finished reading Harrow Lake last summer, I saw one of these in a similar kind of shop, like a shop crammed with weird objects. And this is actually quite an innocent object, that it's a pencil sharpener. I love that something so creepy could be in that. So yeah. So what was it? Did you obviously were aware of jitterbugs when you put them into Harrow Lake? Was that something that you found creepy and thought that you wanted to include, or was there a particular reason?
Well, to be absolutely honest, I mean, most of what I put into my books that is creepy is just something from my own childhood that I've twisted. So this is something that I used to collect jitterbugs completely innocently. They used to be in like, you know, National Trust gift shops and stuff like that. I just used to collect them. And the little waggly tappy legs, I used to love them. And I've only managed to save one, I think, from when I was growing up. But yeah, it wasn't actually going to be in Harrow Lake, the jitterbugs. In a very, very early draft, I'd written that the big thing that seemed to be sort of haunting Lola, I keep going to say Ava now, haunting Lola as she's walking around Harrow Lake, is the sound of ticking clocks, and it was going to be clocks everywhere that seemed that they're stopped, but they're still ticking. So that was going to be like, you know, the big sort of clicking sound that was going to be associated then with Mr. Jitters. But it was one of my critique partners who's like, you know, clocks have kind of been done a lot. So is there anything else that, you know, might be even creepier than that, you know, isn't so, you know, reminiscent of a lot of other things? And I was like, actually, yeah, there is something that I can think of that I might be able to twist and make it even creepier. So yes, the sound of the clocks was replaced by jitterbugs, and that just fits so perfectly because I'd already named Mr. Jitters Mr. Jitters.
Really? That was going to be my next question. I thought that maybe you got that name. That's so interesting. And that's why you need a critique partner, isn't it? Somebody who just pushes you. You have that really good idea and they just push you on to the next step.
Yeah. So yes, very, big shout out there to Kate, my critique partner, who pointed that one out.
Well done, Kate.
Yes. So I got to, really nightmareify something from my childhood that was perfectly innocent up until that point.
Oh, isn't that nice? You can look back now with fear instead of fond memories over your jitterbugs.
Yeah.
Oh, that's such a brilliant answer that I've completely forgotten what my next question is. So. Okay. So I had this idea. I like to always ask a really bizarre question. I think I learned that from Shelley Toy, who's a fantastic chair of events, and she chaired an event with me recently. Always ask a question that pushes people. So if you can assemble a horror film based on parts from horror films you have watched, so you could choose a villain from one film, maybe a hero or heroine from another, a setting from another, what masterpiece of like Frankenstein's monster would you create?
Oh, that's a good question. I'll start with setting because I think I tend to do that with my own stories, and I'm going to do something just as twisted as I did with the jitterbugs. I'm going to say the setting from The Goonies, which isn't a horror film.
It's one of my favorites, Kat. What are you going to do to it?
It's everybody's favorite. So I'm going to have the setting from The Goonies, like all those underground tunnels and massive caverns full of treasure ships and all that sort of thing, and I'm going to put the monsters from The Descent into that setting.
Oh, that's such a good idea. Oh, those poor little Goonies.
I know. So these like evil cave monsters that hunt people and eat them. I'm going to put those into the setting of The Goonies. We can either have the Goonies there, or we can put some other kids in, like the ones from Stranger Things, or maybe the ones from Lock and Key. Any kids, let's put them in there.
The Goonies makes it worse. The Goonies aren't expecting like horror; they're expecting slapstick villains. They're not expecting to be eaten by a cave monster. Oh, I love that, Cat. Okay, so anything.
What shall we arm them with?
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. Like, what can you steal from something else? And I don't know what could kill those monsters. I think if you meet those cave monsters, you're kind of eaten, aren't you? Like, I don't know. Oh, I know. Data could have some sort of accidentally had some sort of sunlight device, maybe that is a short-lived blast of light.
That could work, yeah, because they don't like the daylight.
No, but in typical Data fashion, it doesn't last for long, so you get a few seconds, but then you're gone. Oh, can you just write this, please? Like maybe take the Goonies out, but that's really cool. I love how you've done that. Again, next time,
just ruined one of your childhood favourites. Yeah,
that's what I do. That is his actual favourite. He's got a whole shelf full of Goonies merch, which I'll probably put on the channel at some point to reveal that we are both collectors. I'm more of a random assortment, but his is mostly 80s stuff. That's such a good answer, Kat. So, that was my second last question. So I'd love to know, and I bet other people would too, what are you working on now or planning to work on next?
Well, I'm in the very, very early stages of writing another story that's going to be sort of in the same genre, same sort of similar vein to Harrow Lake and Wicked Little Deeds. So it's going to be another horror thriller type book about an isolated house and a group of teenagers who stumble upon it on their way to a music festival and find themselves trapped there, and then realise quite quickly that they're not alone.
I love that. What do you think about what I don't know, and obviously I won't ask you to reveal anything secret if you already have such news, but what do you think of the thought of your books being made into films? Because as you described that, I could just imagine that on screen immediately. Do you like the idea?
I do love the idea, and if that was to happen, I'm not sure. I'd love to sort of like sit back and see that interpreted by somebody. I don't think I have the skills to do like script writing or anything like that. That's a completely different skill set to what I have. But yeah, I would love to see a story idea of mine on screen one day. That would be fantastic.
I think you'd really push the filmmakers as well, because how do you not reveal when it's visual that the supernatural threat could be supernatural or could be something really innocent? And I think that'd be really cool. Yes, please, if anybody watching would like to adapt one of Kat's books, and if you think about adapting, maybe go for mine too, but definitely Harrow Lake. And
both of ours do a mashup.
Wow. Can you imagine Mr. Jitters just jitters into New Orleans like, hi. I'm just going to set up shop there. I'm just going to set up shop beneath New Orleans and just like pop up in the middle of a, I don't know, like voodoo shop or haunted house experience.
I think you'd fit right in.
Brilliant. Okay, that's another thing we'll do. Harrow New Orleans mashup. Got it. So as I like to end on a little quickfire round. So I've got a few things which I haven't warned you about, Kat. So whatever your first answer is, or even if the answer is, I've got no idea. Fine. Okay. So just quick questions then, like one word answer. Your favourite monster from a movie?
The alien from Aliens.
Oh, that's a good answer. I always go with It. I know that's the predictable answer, but the one that scared me as a kid. Favourite hero or heroine from a movie?
I'm going to go with Ripley. I'm on a theme here.
No, I was just thinking that. And that's always the answer I give as well, because I just think she goes through such an interesting journey. And I could see her in a YA book really like taking down. I mean, Mr. Jitters versus Ripley would be quite a good encounter, wouldn't it?
Amazing. Let's do that.
Okay, favourite serial killer, real or imagined?
Ooh.
I know, what a question. Sorry. Which serial killer do you really like?
Let's go Freddy Krueger, because he's absolutely unredeemable
and terrifying.
Yeah, that too.
And again, that supernatural feel of, is he a dream, is he real? Favorite vampire?
Other than yours?
Good answer.
I think Lestat. The vampire Lestat.
I know this is quickfire, but why do you like Lestat? Not a very quick fiery follow-up.
Well, I read the Anne Rice vampire books when I was a teenager, and I loved, I read Interview with the Vampire, which is obviously more about Louis, but then you read The Vampire Lestat after that and see all of those events from a completely different and much more likable and interesting and funny perspective. And you think, yeah, he's the one, because you've seen him sort of as a villain up to that point, and he is a villain, but you then start to see things from his perspective, and he's just really fun to hang around with and kill people with.
I know, if you're going to be with a vampire forever, they might as well be fun, right? They might as well not be the like Louis or Stefan from Vampire Diaries or Angel from Buffy, kind of feeling really sorry about what they've done. And it's funny, as a teenager, they were the ones. So when I read Into the Vampire as a teenager, I thought Louis was lovely because he was, kind and stuff. Yeah. And same with Buffy. I watched it, loved Angel, and then watched it again a few years later and went, what am I doing? Spike in fact, I've got a Spike, but just to prove, I've got a Spike within reach.
I do love Spike figure as well.
Yes. You've got to have a Spike sitting on your desk. Yeah, I like those vampires. I like the Damons and Erics that are redeemable up to a point, and then they snap your friend's neck and you go, oh yeah, I forgot that you're actually evil. I think that is the fun thing about vampires. I like the ones that have a touch of humanity and then they can lose it at a moment's notice. I think that's really fun. Yeah, sorry, I'm not very good at the quickfire round. Rubbish. So what are your favourite horror tropes or trope?
I love the being trapped in a confined space horror trope, because I think at heart extremely claustrophobic, and I tend to put a scene where somebody is trapped in a confined space in all of my stories, whether they be horror or not.
There's a really good one in Wicked Little Deeds, if anyone's wondering. Yeah. Little plug there. It really is.
Thank you. I love the unreliable narrator sort of thing comes in quite a lot. I like the excuse me. I like the being in a small town and not being able to escape. So I think the no escape thing seems to come up a lot for me. That's my favorite.
I think that is good for horror though, isn't it? It's trying to find a scenario that your protagonist can't get away from, because otherwise they just wouldn't they? And like book over, I'm just going to drive away from this town where everybody wants to kill me. Like you need to think of reasons why they can't phone for help, get away from the situation. That's why I sang it in 1995, although I wasn't thinking that at the time. I was thinking Interview with the Vampire movie's just come out. New Orleans is really dangerous at this period in time. I wasn't actually thinking no mobile phones, but that did help quite a lot.
It was very handy, yeah.
And the internet was only just kind of coming into use. I checked and I just about got away with not using the internet. Maybe if I write a sequel, it'll be a bit harder, but so last question then, and then I will let you go back to your Sunday. What were your least favourite tropes in horror? So is there any trope that you watch it and you roll your eyes and you go, oh, don't do that. Why would you do that?
Um, I suppose there are, the ones where it's like, I was actually watching the Point Horror Club chat that was on last night, and they were saying, about what was the name of the book that they were doing yesterday? It was April Fools.
Yeah.
Where, something absolutely awful happens and the main character wants to call the police, but then the friends are like, no, you're making a big deal about it. It's like, no, call the police, or at least, make it, give them a good reason why they can't. So that sort of trope where it's like they could easily sort of subvert this terrible thing from happening. That I find, I'm like, come on, shouting at the screen when it's in a horror film or something. But obviously it has its purpose, because it gets you shouting at the screen.
Yeah, it's the same as mine, really. I've got one, which is when the characters say, let's just split up, it'll be faster. You just go, no, only half of you are going to make it out of that decision. And I think sometimes if it is in there just to be a plot point, I find it a little bit irritating. But if there's a reason to split up, like they're in limited time, or there are obvious different routes they can go, I think it's fine. And like your situation, if there's a genuine reason not to call the police, like if you've accidentally run somebody over, you should probably call the police.
Yeah.
Don't dump them, there's a nearby river, we're going to put them in there. And I think anything that makes it not feel like it could be real kind of ruins the illusion of horror a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think the making a bad choice, if it's a stupid choice, that I find annoying. A bad choice, for good reasons, is always quite, I get invested in that. But if it's just, a momentary, why would you do that? It's like not even in character. So
yeah, that's exactly it, isn't it? A bad choice in keeping with your character's flaws, I think, can be a great plot moment, but a bad choice that's just for the sake of, I need to make this last 2 more hours or 200 more pages, is a bit pointless.
Yeah, it shows itself up, I think.
Yeah, it does. And I said that was going to be the last question, but actually I've just thought of one more, which I'm sure people watching this will be interested. Obviously, you write such amazing horror. What would you say to horror authors? I'm sure you get asked this all the time. I'm going to ask it again. What is your piece of advice that you give to somebody who either wants to write horror or is writing it now?
I think try and write something that you would find scary, which is sort of just, a horror twist on the general writing advice that you should write something that you would want to read yourself. So you can't scare everybody, because not everybody finds the same things frightening. Scary clowns are scary, but not everybody is as scared by clowns as they really should be.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you put things into your books which you find scary and write about them in the way that they scare you, I think that comes across, and scares more people that way. I said scary a lot in that answer.
I always think that in my talks. I get to the end, I think, how many times did I say vampires in that? But no, that's really good advice. Thank you. I felt like my face was zoning out then, because I was just thinking that's what I need to do in my current book that I'm trying to write. So thank you, Kat. I'm just like internalizing how I can steal that and use it for my own gains. I really enjoyed that conversation. I knew I would enjoy talking to you. I'm such a huge fan of yours as a person and as an author, so thank you for agreeing to join me. And I hope that the viewers, have enjoyed our horror talk. This was hopefully the first of many with other authors. I've got some lined up with YA contemporary authors and children's book authors, so hopefully there'll be something for everyone. But my first one was with the brilliant Cat Ellis. I hope you'll pre-order her amazing book, Burden Falls, if you're in the United States, and Wicked Little Deeds if you're in the UK. So that's it from me. I hope you will like and subscribe and watch my future videos, and enjoy your Sunday or Monday whenever I decide to put this video up. So thank you.
Thank you.